Good morning. Where I come from, we say Bilahok. Bilahok. That means good morning. Hello. My name is Jeff Anstead. I'm a citizen of the Haliwa Saponi Indian tribe, which is located in the north and eastern section of North Carolina. Our tribe consists of about 4,000 citizens. We're the third largest tribe in the state of North Carolina. We're the only tribe in the state of North Carolina that operates a state chartered school. So we educate our children right in our communities, which is very important. I'm so happy to be here today. In the state of North Carolina, I wear many hats, or custodes. I'm an Indian commissioner for the state with the North Carolina Commission on Indian Affairs. I was appointed to the DEQ Advisory Committee back last year, and I believe in working for our people. We always believe in 7 generations. That's the way we think. As Indian people, from the time of contact, we always prepared for 7 generations. In 2019, it's the most important time for us to plan for our next 7 generations. Because if we don't, they're not going to enjoy this earth as we know it. State of North Carolina has 8 recognized tribes. It's Haliwa Saponi, the Lumbee tribe, the Kahari Indian tribe, the Wakamasuan tribe, the Meharan tribe, the Occaneechi Band of Saponi tribe, and the Saponi tribes, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee. We also have 4 Indian urban organizations: Triangle Native Organization in Raleigh, Metrolina Native Organization in Charlotte, Gifford Native Organization in Greensboro, and one more, Cumberland County Association for Indian People in Fayetteville. State of North Carolina, like I said, has the biggest population of Indian people east of the Mississippi, which is something that probably 80% of this population doesn't know, that we're still here. We're still living on traditional lands. You know, where I live, our traditional land, we sort of migrated there. We were put on a fort one time, Fort Christiana, up in Lawrenceville, Virginia, where we were taught Christianity ways. We were taught English, but we left. We left that fort because it wasn't a good thing for our people. We're very traditional people. We have always educated our people. From the 1800s of having Secret Hill Indian School to Bethlehem Indian School to present day Haliwa Saponi Indian School, we always believed in the education of our people. I'm glad to be here today. I just left a unity conference in Raleigh where we had over 250 participants at this unity conference. It was great medicine for me. I'm going to share with you some traditional songs. In these songs, I'm going to give an honoring to each person here. And in one song, I'm going to give you a traveling song. We believe in our life, we take a journey. We go through our ceremonies and we take a journey. But we have to take a song with us. We have to take a protection song. We have to take a song of guidance. And I believe everybody needs to understand that. You have to have your song of guidance. You have to be true to yourself. You can't get wrapped up in the corporate world. You got to be true to yourself. That's what's going to make the difference in this world. You know, we've got a lot of things coming into North Carolina that's devastating. We live in a state where we need stronger laws. We need legislation to stand up and pass laws that's protection of our lands and protection of our people. And we're working on that. Right now, I'm going to share a little bit with you guys, and I'm just so happy to be here today. I'm so glad to walk into a room and feel so welcome. We, as Indian people, we need to work harder at including ourselves within all the organizations in the state to be a part of it and let people hear our stories and understand who we are and where we come from. We are the indigenous people. We are the original inhabitants of this land, and we still are the protectors of this land. So thank you. hey, yo, hey, ha, hey, hey, yo, yo, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, yo, hey, 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 yo, yo, hey, yo, hey, hey, yo, yo, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, yo, hey, 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 yo, hey, ha, hey, yo, hey, ha, ya, hey, hey, yo, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, yo, hey, 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 do. Yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, ha, hey, yo, hey, ha, ya, hey, hey, do. Yo, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, ha, yo, ho, hey, yo, hey, 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 do. Yo, hey, yo, hey, yeah, hey, yo, yo, hey, 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 yo, hey, 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 yo, yo, hey, 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 yo, hey, 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 yo, hey, yo. Yo, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, yo. Yo, hey, yo, hey, hey, yo, hey, 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 yo, hey, do. In that song, I never ended this song. So this song is for you. Don't let your visions and your passion end. Continue, but be true to your heart. Thank you very much for having me. I invite all of you here to our powwow, which is the third weekend in April. It's the oldest and the largest powwow in the state of North Carolina. We come from a very rural community. We're 30 miles from anywhere. We come from a community that is intentionally targeted for projects like the Atlantic Coast Pipeline and other things. But we invite you out. We got a commission on Indian Affairs here in Raleigh. You can go to the commission site and you can look at all the tribes in the state and also all the activities. We stay very busy. But if you have time, third weekend of April, come down and see our people. Come down and see our little ones of the schools that we have and the things we have in our community. Thank you very much. Bila hope to each and every one here, and thank you again.
Thank you, Jeff, for truly putting us in context about where we are and the history of the people who came here, who were here, and who set this table that we're fighting for now. How many, Jeff, are these your glasses? Next, I'd like to ask Reich Longest to come and give us a welcome. Reich is the director of the Environmental Law and Policy Clinic here at Duke Law School and our host, and also a clinical professor of law here at Duke Law School, right?
Thank you all, and welcome from Duke University to each and every one of you. I also wanted to just talk a little bit about some of the organizations and most importantly the people that are here with those organizations who have helped make today possible. This particular symposium is co-presented with the Duke Integrated Toxicology and Environmental Health Program. Every time I mention an organization, I'd like for the people who are associated with that organization to stand. So the people who are here with the Duke Integrated Toxicology and Environmental Health Program, please stand up so we can say hello. I do not believe anybody is here today from the Duke Office of Faculty Advancement, But that was one of the generous grant sponsors, which allowed us to design a symposium that was community-focused and community-centered. And so I want to definitely thank them as well. And then we have some co-sponsors who are here today. So Bennett College. So Dr. Johnson. Yes. The Yale School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. I know we've got some Yale folks here. All right. Vermont Law School is definitely here. Yeah, I understand you all had a good chance to enjoy Durham last night, so that's great. The Environmental Law Clinic at Columbia. So I know we got Marion. No? Let's hear. Okay, well, anyway. And the Union of Concerned Scientists. Yeah. So UCS and VLS have tables back there. I would invite you also to look at the table back there where we have also some information about the Environmental Law and Policy Clinic, and most importantly, some articles from the latest issue of the North Carolina Medical Journal involving some of the topics that we've been looking at recently. Now, this symposium was designed, our steering committee decided that we needed to make sure that we also had a planning committee, so we're going to talk about, a little bit about who those people are. So, Dr. Adrian Hollis. Yes, again. Denise Abdul-Rahman. Yes. A.O. Wilson. Thought I saw him. Well, he was here last night. Yeah, there we go. Dr. Raji, you're here. I saw you. Yes, there we go. Jameson Davis. Yeah. Dr. Valerie Ann Johnson. And Dr. Nancy Lauer, back there. Oh, over there. And most importantly, I wanted to make sure to give a warm thank you to the person who left herself off this list, and that's Claire Herman. Please, all of us. Author. It was Claire's vision and Claire's constant reminders to me in a gentle way to be true to the principles that we set forth that helped me as I was trying to make sure to honor the principles that we set up for this symposium. And we hope that this will be a set of principles that we can use going forward in all of our interactions with community members and among community faculty, because the reality is the types of silos that we create for ourselves with the organizations to which we belong, with the titles that we put on, with the jackets that we wear, all of those things are things that separate us. But there only is one planet. This is the only one we know of that is our home, and it's all our home. And we are here together to learn how to work in community with one another. And we better get used to getting along with one another, regardless of where we came from or what silo we may be affiliated with. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here today. And we're now going to form, storm, norm, and perform. All right.
Thank you, Reich. And it's true, Claire has been just the central organizing force that has marshaled everything and everybody. And it has been a pleasure, Claire, really to partner with you in this effort. So without further ado, let me introduce our keynote for this morning. Mustafa SantiagoAli is currently, now let's see if I can get this title, Vice President at the National Wildlife Federation for Environmental Justice and Climate Resilience, or Climate Justice. Yes? Say that what? And community revitalization. Let's not leave out the community revitalization. I have known Mustafa since, I think, 1993, maybe a little before that. But when did you first go to EPA? End of 91. So I've known him since 1991 and have watched him grow in this work, and to see him grow and maintain his integrity while working at the Environmental Protection Agency through the dark days and the bright days and the dark days and then back to the really, really dark days. And you all might remember, he told me something last night, and he's a really good friend of mine, and I talk to him all the time, but he told me something last night that was startling. So you may remember that early in the transition to this current administration, A lot of people left EPA, but Mustafa was one of the first people to leave EPA and to say out loud, I'm leaving because I don't think this president and this administration and the leadership of EPA care about environmental protection or care about environmental justice or care about environmental enforcement and equal protection before the law. So I'm out. But before I go, let me tell y'all what we have done and what you could do. And then he left. And in that interregnum period when he left to go to the hip hop caucus, he got lots of death threats. And last night was the first time he mentioned that to me. So when people are stepping out and doing this work, a lot of times it's so much deeper than the policy or the advocacy or the litigation or the scientific research that we all undertake. But for a lot of people who do this work, they put their hearts and souls on the line to do it every day, right? And to sacrifice whatever needs to be sacrificed. And so there's so much more I could say about Mustafa, but integrity is something that he walks with and lives with on a daily basis. Standing up for justice is something he walks with and lives with on a daily basis. And bringing justice to folks, shining a light on what's happening around the country. And now we're going to see what he's really made of and see if he can change the ship of the National Wildlife Federation. Without further ado, Mustafa Ali.
I'm good. I don't know if I'm that good to tell y'all the truth, but we're going to try. Most of y'all know me. I'm going to see if I can get this to work. I have no idea. Because I'm not good at standing behind these things. How's everybody doing? Y'all going to make me take the jacket off already, right? How's everybody doing?
Good.
All right. I just want to do a couple of quick things. One, two people have talked about Claire. We need to give Claire a round of applause. Please give her a round of applause. Yes, y'all should actually stand up, and I'm going to tell you why. Claire is a saint. I'm going to tell y'all why. If any of y'all know me and you know how crazy my schedule is, Claire never got shook one time. At least I didn't know about it. She would call, and then she'd be like, I'm sure Mustafa will call me back sometime in the next 3-4 months. And she was just fantastic, and along with all the other folks who helped to pull this together. So I just want to say thank y'all. I also want to give a shout out to, I guess I'm part of the alumni at Vermont Law School. So if y'all could give them another round of applause holding it down. And it's an honor and it's a blessing to be here with y'all. I see so many familiar faces in the room. You're going to see some photos that'll be sliding by. They are to actually anchor you. It's not about the words that folks share with you. It's about the reality of what's actually happening on the ground, the deeds that are happening, intended, sometimes unintended, and sometimes focused on actually extracting wealth from communities and extracting their health. So those are the most important. Along with the folks who are here in the room with you, you have a wealth of knowledge. And for the students and others who say that you are serious about working on environmental justice and climate justice issues, if you are not tapping into these incredible leaders who have been doing this work for decades now, then you are missing a prime opportunity. It's like having that one professor that you've always wanted to take their course. You have that opportunity here, and I hope that you take advantage of it. I have given thousands of presentations now, and folks know that I always give honor to my mother and my grandmother, who are the rocks that I stand on, and who also helped to prepare me. If you are working on civil rights issues, if you are working on social justice issues, if you are working on environmental justice issues or public health issues, you may have some tough days. How many folks in the room have ever had a tough day? Raise your hand. Everybody hold your hand up high. Find that person who never had a tough day, just run over and touch them real quick. It's important because you need that energy. My mother and my grandmother, especially me being a young man of color, told me, and folks who know me know what I'm about to share with you, that yes, you're going to have some tough days, but you're going to have to figure out how to deal with those tough days if you're going to be serious about the issues that you are working on. So my mother and my grandmother told me to find some words of empowerment. I've used these every day since I've been 16 years old, except for 2 times. I'll talk to you all about those 2 times, and then you can blame on me what happened those 2 times, maybe just 1 time. But every day I get up, I look in the mirror, and I say I'm blessed and highly favored. Now, I know I'm in the South, so I know somebody in here can recognize what I'm talking about. I should tell y'all also, folks don't know, I was raised in a family of Baptist and Pentecostal ministers. How many folks know anybody who's Baptist or Pentecostal? Raise your hand. All right. We got a few heathens in the house, I see. But everybody try it with me. I'm blessed and highly favored. All the folks who went to the club last night, I'm blessed and highly favored. All right, and this last time, we're going to actually say it like we mean it, like we actually expect positive energy to surround us. I'm blessed, and highly favored. And you are. And the reason that you are is because you have an opportunity to actually make real change happen, to stand in solidarity with communities and use your expertise to support the work that can make positive change. Sometimes we forget about that. Because lots of times we go to school, we get a bunch of letters after our name, and we begin to think about all the debt that we have, and we begin to accept jobs and positions just to pay that off instead of following what your passion is and the ability to actually make real change happen. You feel me on that? And I get $80,000, $100,000, $200,000 in debt, and you have to make some decisions about how and where you want your life to go. Am I going to go work for a big firm and spend 80, 90 hours a week researching for someone? That's just reality for some folks. That's the path that they go down. Or you can begin to change some dynamics. You can begin to be an individual like Luke Cole. Someone, how many folks know who Luke Cole was? So if you are an attorney or hoping to be an attorney, and you have not raised your hand and you say that you care about environmental and climate issues, you need to pull your phone out and start Googling. He was one of the greats, along with a gentleman by the name of Grover Hankins, who helped at the Thurgood Marshall Law Center. I think I said that properly. There are so many incredible folks who have given their lives from the legal sense to help to make real change happen. So as I have grown in these issues, being surrounded by many of the incredible folks in this room and others across the country, I began to think much more critically about environmental justice, environmental injustice, where it actually started. What is sort of the foundation in that space? And we're going to talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about some of the impacts that are happening, some of the communities across the country, but we also need to be extremely focused on our own power and how we make real change happen. And there are numbers of communities across the country who you don't see on CNN or MSNBC who never get the spotlight but continue to do the hard work and are making real change happen. Is that all right with everyone? So let's go back to when this all really began. So from the first days, some people say 1619, it was actually 1539, the first time African Americans or Africans actually made it to our shores, and that was in Florida. But you can go to Virginia in 1619. You saw that first slide where you actually saw the hands with the chains, right? So environmental injustices began as soon as slaves came off the ship. And it's okay for us to go back and take a look at that. That is not holding anyone in this room accountable for those sins, but we have to understand what happened. As soon as they came off of those ships, they were taken away from their culture, right? They were placed on plantations, given some of the hardest work to do. So when we talk about jobs and justice, now we're thinking back to those times when people were not paid, of course, for the work that was happening. They were placed in some of the most dangerous jobs. Does that make sense to everyone? So when you're talking about environmental justice, environmental injustice, understand the platform of where we're coming from. Go back to Native American brothers and sisters and how in many instances they were removed from their land, moved in many instances away from cultural practices, cultural food. So everybody who talks about food justice now understand the history behind what was happening in that space. Does that make sense to everyone? And a number of other things were happening. Some folks who often get forgotten in our conversation is our Asian and Pacific Islander brothers and sisters. You saw a slide that I intentionally put on there because everybody wants to talk about infrastructure now. Well, who helped to build the infrastructure in our country? Slaves were one group, right? Indigenous brothers and sisters played a role. But Asian brothers and sisters also, especially Chinese Americans, played a significant role in the building of our infrastructure in the sense of our railroads, right? And our canal system. Some people don't know about that. And what happened in that dynamic was that, again, they were pulled away from traditional practices. If people began to do their own traditional practices, they were looked down on. There were all kinds of different laws that were put in place and a number of other things, moved from foods and given some of the most dangerous jobs. If you go back and look at who was leading some of the blasting that was going on and some of the other things in that space, it was Chinese brothers and sisters at that time. So You also saw the slide of Warren County, North Carolina, which for us is the flashpoint. Some people also talk about 1968 and Dr. King when he was dealing with the Sanitation Workers March. And many of you understand that dynamic. We say Warren County, and everybody knows Warren County's just down on the other side and what happened in that space. What I really appreciate there is the visuals, and you saw one of the slides that was there of folks laying down in the road. And I want to remind you all, the civil rights movement was a lot of young people as well who are leading that. So people now talk about all the incredible energy that's going on. There is a history that has took place that we should always remember. And then you will also see a number of young people who were there in Warren County with elders as well, because in environmental justice, we have an intergenerational movement who also were laying down in those roads, trying to stop those trucks from bringing in those PCBs and those cancer-causing chemicals into that community. So that's a part of our foundation. But there are a lot of smart folks in the room. Everybody in the room was blessed to go to high school? Raise your hand if you went to high school. So every person in this room. Some of our folks were blessed to be able to go to college. We have all these letters after our names, and when we sit down with community groups, we want to let folks know how much we know. I'm guilty. When I first started, one of the first meetings I went to, I'm like, oh, I went to school and I know a couple of things. And I remember I went to a meeting in Louisiana, and there was an elder in the community, wonderful lady, and I stood up and I said a few words, and then she said, Mustafa, she said, baby, we don't care about your degrees. She said, what we care about is if you're going to actually be here and you're actually going to stay focused and you're going to honor what we're talking about. The reason I share that with you is because sometimes when we start talking about air pollution and water pollution and pollution of the land, we want to share with folks every scientific fact that we might know and forget about how and what is actually going on in their lives. So let me share this with you. How many folks in the room, because I want to simplify it, how many folks in the room, by a show of hands, have taken a breath of air in, let's say, the last 60 seconds? Raise your hand if you breathed some air in the last 60 seconds. Raise your hand up high. I want everybody to see it. Everybody find the non-air breathers. Why? It's like a silly question, Mustafa. Why are you asking me that question? It's an autonomic response. It's something that all of us do. But unfortunately, sometimes we forget the dynamic that's actually happening in communities. We got 200,000 people in our country who are dying prematurely from air pollution. If we had 200,000 people who are dying from something else, there would be a huge amount of attention that would be on that, right? So what's going on in that space? We have places like Southwest Detroit. How many folks have been to Detroit? How many folks drove by Detroit? Okay, because some people look like they wasn't sure if they should be going by Detroit. You have folks who are living next to the Marathon Refinery and some of the other polluting facilities that are there. And when children wake up and they look out their window, instead of them seeing the beautiful scenery that we have here, they see facilities. They see stacks. And when they try and take a breath of air, they're not getting what you just got. Everybody do me a favor. Take a deep breath. Let it out. When we take that in, we assume that something positive is going into our bodies, right? But far too many communities are not receiving that. In our country, that's what I want to anchor with you all. We have this slogan about the United States or America being the greatest country on the planet. If we say that, shouldn't we have to live up to that ideal? So how do we have so many people who are dying from air pollution? And we've seen the litany of stories, reports, and analysis that have come out recently talking about all kinds of different things. Babies being born with smaller brains because of air pollution, dementia, Alzheimer's, all these different types of things. I can go down the laundry list of things. And you go to places like the Manchester community in Houston, Texas. How many folks have been to Houston? How many folks have been to the Ship Channel? Now, see, here's the dynamic. We got a whole bunch of folks in the room, and we're all family. So we say we care about these issues, but yet we are not wedded to what's actually happening. Why is the Manchester community important? It's like a number of communities. When you go there, how many folks in the room, watch this, how many folks in the room got an old car? Yeah, you know you're in a fancy place when only 5 people got an old car. Keep your hands up if you got an old car. We're going to see how old your car is. Oh, okay. Some more people threw their hands up. They're like, let me just throw it up because other people put their hands up. All the people with an old car. How many folks actually have a car that you got to roll the window down? My man said, I got one of those. He said, I ain't got that good job yet. Okay. What's your name, brother? Brandon. Come here, Brandon. You shouldn't have said your name, Brandon. Brandon, have a seat. He said this was not on the handout. Let me get close to Brandon because we got a little subcompact old car, right? Brandon and I are driving. We're in Houston. We're moving down to the ship channel. We're going, you comfortable?
I'm good.
Okay.
Let me wind it down a little bit.
He's rolling down the window as we pull up to the Manchester community. And the first thing that you breathe in, you feel like you're breathing in gasoline fumes. In the Manchester community. When Brandon looks out the window, he's like, Mustafa, what's going on? Because when you look out, all you see for miles and miles are petrochemical facilities. You saw a picture of Cesar Chavez High School. That's the picture that you saw the track and the school, and you saw the flaring in the background. People who live in the Manchester community, and there's an incredible organization there called Tejas. Juan Paras runs that organization, along with a number of other incredible folks. If you go on people's back porch or front porch, and you pick up a big rock, heavy rock, and you throw it, you would literally touch the piping that exists in these facilities. That's how close people live. And they are breathing it in every day. Cancers, liver disease, kidney disease, all kinds of bronchial-related problems in the greatest country on the planet, contributing to the 200,000 people who are dying prematurely. But also, how is that possible? And we'll talk a little bit about zoning and restrictive covenants and redlining, all these things that drive certain people in certain places and move other people out of those places. Thank you, brother.
Oh, thank you.
Well, you can stay. Come on, man. You can hang out with me for a little while. Nah, you'll have to. You everybody give Brandon a round of applause? You got to think about this dynamic. Here's the other thing. So when people come to you and start talking about, well, these environmental issues are not that serious, right? We all love our military, correct? Or we support the military. All right. I heard that. I heard that. You saw another slide that not enough people talk about. That was the one that talks about how many people have died in our wars. Now, most folks in the room are young enough to remember the Iraq War and the Afghanistan wars that are still going on, correct? There are folks in the room who remember the Vietnam War and the Korean War. We don't have to go any further than that. You take the total number of individuals who have died in those wars. Hold on to that for a second. And more people are dying every year prematurely from air pollution than died in those wars. But we give a huge amount of attention, and we should, to supporting our troops. But why don't we give the same amount of attention to the people who are dying prematurely from air pollution? Right? And ozone is now becoming a much more significant problem. It always has been, because climate change is going to drive that, no pun intended, through the roof. Okay? I want you to think about that. By a show of hands, in the last 24 hours, long time, right? Compared to 60 seconds. How many folks in the room have taken a drink of water or a beverage? Because I saw some of y'all last night. Keep your hands up. Find the camels, find them. Every person in this room has raised their hand. So this is where it gets real, especially here in North Carolina and lots of other places across the country. You all have seen the statistics that are going on in relationship to our water quality, both those who are hooked up to systems and those who are getting their water from wells. There's some real scary stuff that's going on. And we have an administration that seems to be completely out of touch with what's going on. So Vernice talked about, me leaving and the various things in that space. For me, it was quite simple. And since there are a lot of attorneys in the room, and I was talking to another attorney yesterday about we need to start actually looking at culpability. I'll talk a little bit about that in the Flint context. But if we know these chemicals are impacting, making people sick, killing people, then for me, and again, I'm not a practicing attorney, but I see culpability if we are actually hurting people in that direction. Now, if I say Flint, how many folks know what happened in Flint, Michigan? I'm assuming almost every person in here. You understand the dynamics of children being exposed to lead, lowering IQ points, taking away future opportunities, causing all kinds of health problems. Of course, we saw the Legionnaire's disease that came out also in Flint, all these various dynamics that are going on in that space. But we forget that there are over 3,000 locations that have higher levels of lead in their water than Flint. We still have schools that are not properly testing. We have states that don't have the regulations in place to make sure that students are being protected. But it's growing in the sense that we now have, people are finally starting to pay attention to PFOS and PFAS and a number of the other things that are going on here. You guys saw at Camp Lejeune, and you saw the slide of some of the exposures that some of the folks were dealing with there. We know the algae blooms that are continuing to grow, and we know that there's a linkage that's there between some of the CAFOs and some of the farm runoff into our water bodies. And sometimes we forget how limited the amount of our drinking water actually is. Because when we take the shots from space and we see our planet is blue, we assume that there's plenty to go around. And some people would actually have you believe that, because if we didn't think that there was plenty of water, then the waters of the U.S. rule that folks work so diligently on, and that has huge impacts here in North Carolina and across the country, folks would be supporting it. It's almost like when we were talking about the air-related issues, and you guys see that one. That one always trips me out, because most people would never think in a million years how much water it takes to actually make one T-shirt. But yet we just buy, throw away, buy, throw away. And that seems to be the model that we've sort of taken on. Of course, our elders had a much different model, sometimes out of necessity, sometimes just out of basic common sense. But even going back to the air issues, when you see these folks talking about rolling back the Clean Power Plan, and North Carolina doesn't have as many coal plants as some of the other locations do, but still have issues that were in that space. What kind of sense does that make if we know that people are getting sick, people are dying, and you are going to weaken those protections? And then we'll talk about climate change in a little bit. When we talk about the methane rule or the refinery rule or some of the others that are out there that are making the opportunity for more people to get exposed to pollution, there has to be a linkage between the decisions that are being made and the impacts that are happening in people's lives. Does that make sense to everyone? And we can go down the list and talk about Superfund sites. You all know with all the flooding that came through. And let's just go back to the Manchester community. And let's go to Port Arthur, Texas, also right there on the Gulf Coast. So when those hurricanes came through and those floods came through, they also began to breach those Superfund sites and move that pollution around. So people were getting what I often call the double and triple whammy in the communities that have environmental justice concerns. So the first one is the initial exposure, right? And we now have this conversation that's going on about existential threats, right? People talk about that in relationship to climate change. Have folks heard people use that language? This is the greatest challenge of our lifetime. Sometimes they forget in that sort of analysis that the majority of fossil fuel facilities are located where? In communities of color, low-income communities, and indigenous land. And people for decades and decades and decades were saying, please pay attention because we're getting sick and we're being exposed. 1. 2, pipelines. Where do those pipelines run? Communities of color, low-income communities, indigenous populations. You saw a slide, the Atlantic Coast Pipeline. But, you know, and we had a great conversation last night. How many folks, before you saw the slide, knew that there are 2.4 million miles of pipeline in our country? So 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. 4. Can I get 5? 2.4 million miles of pipeline. And we want to build more. And if you actually do an analysis of the pipelines, you'll find that many of them are nowhere near capacity. So they continue to build. The Atlantic Coast Pipeline, folks talked a little bit last night, starting in West Virginia. How many West Virginians are in the house? Yep, we don't get out much, do we? All right. I'm a West Virginian. Nobody believes me. I got an accent when I need it. I want you to think about something. So starting in West Virginia, running down through Virginia, here to North Carolina, I worked on a case that's still going on, or working with folks, let me say it that way to be correct. They're in a community that you saw on one of the slides that was founded by freed slaves. Freed slaves, right outside of Richmond. And folks have continued to try and stop this. The governor has not done what he's supposed to do in that space. A natural gas compressor is being placed in that community. And you guys have seen, as the pipeline moves, where people are trying to place the natural gas compressors. And there's all kinds of different dynamics that are going on in that space. It's not just about those compressors moving, those fossil fuels, that frack gas. It's also about the possibilities of explosions. It's also about breaching. I haven't seen any pipelines that there haven't been breaches. There may be some out there I've just not been aware of. Eventually, there's going to be a breach. So then folks have to deal with that. Here's the other thing. Because we talked about the fossil fuel facilities being located in the communities. We're talking about the pipelines being placed in those communities. How many folks follow Homeland Security related issues? So when I was on Capitol Hill, I used to do some stuff. Benny Thompson at that time was the chairman of the Homeland Security Committee. He used to work across the hall. And we used to talk when we get in the elevator going to places. We used to talk about Tier 2 targets. Tier 2 targets are those facilities we're talking about. They're talking about pipelines. And those are located in whose communities? So if there was an attack, once again, it is the most vulnerable communities who would have to deal with that dynamic and have to figure out. Omega and some other folks were talking last night about when we have these storms that come through and how in many instances folks are not prepared. We're also not prepared if someone did something in one of these sites. So how are we helping to protect and prepare communities for some of these impacts that go on? So with all these different types of challenges we have going on, there are also some bright lights that happen from the community side and also structurally. But it seems like every time we get something in place, someone loses their damn mind. I'm glad this is on film so they can hear what I'm about to say. So not only do we have an administration that continues to roll back all of the various things that folks in this room and across the country have been pushing for just to get some basic things in place. Enforcement actions are now down to just a very small percentage of what they were before. But we also on the state level got some folks who need to get their act together. In Virginia, we have a governor who's allowed air permits to be able to move forward, impacting communities, right? I'm not taking away from any other positive thing that you may have done, but you have a responsibility to make sure that you are protecting the lives of communities. In North Carolina, I'm about to get in real trouble now. There's an advisory board that was put in place for environmental justice that was supposed to help to make sure that the voices of communities had the ability to influence the process. And they had a great example in the sense that when folks look at the Environmental Protection Agency, I'll just take you back just a little bit real quickly. When you see some of the positive things that have come out of that agency, when you hear about the Office of Environmental Justice, when you hear about the Environmental Justice Small Grant Program, when you hear about Executive Order 12898 that President Clinton signed, the various other actions, the interagency working group that happened, those came out of sets of recommendations from communities. So there are a certain level of expectations, and they've ebbed and flowed with the effectiveness and moving backwards and forwards, but it was always there. So when the state of North Carolina puts together an advisory committee that the community and others are supposed to have a voice in helping to frame out what's happening when we talk about the hog farms or the CAFOs, when we talk about these water quality issues, when we talk about these air quality issues, or even when we get focused on actually job creation in this space, then those advisory committees have to have the ability to be able to move the process. And now we have here some funny business. Is that the way you would say it? Omega taught me that, funny business. And it's got to be addressed. So don't put things in place if you're not serious about making real change happen. And real change can happen. So everybody talks about this new clean, green economy. We got the Green New Deal, but even before the Green New Deal, we had green zones that came from environmental justice organizations about changing the dynamics in their community, addressing the impacts, but also bringing resources and jobs back into the community. That is a part of our paradigm. The first part is dealing with the past and present impacts, but we're also focused on creating and moving what I've often said and others say, moving our most vulnerable communities from surviving to thriving. What does that look like? There are numerous examples. You can look at the work that Omega has been doing in Mebane, but you can also look at places like in Kansas City with Miss Margaret May. You can look at the work of the Environmental Health Coalition that's happening in San Diego. I'm so glad that people are writing this down. Because you can't talk about environmental justice if you can't show how successes are happening. Because that's the first thing people are going to ask you, what does success look like? So you've got to be able to point that out as well, of where we're trying to get to. And if you are someone who follows from a faith-based paradigm, then look at the work of Reverend Floyd Flake in Jamaica, Queens, Reverend Suarez in Jersey City. Look at the work of Bethel New Life in Chicago. Or you can look at the Regenesis Project in Spartanburg, South Carolina, which is not that far away. And it is not the only example, but it's one that I like to share because it has intersection points for folks, especially when we begin to have this conversation about renewable energy and job creation. And it looks like the communities that many of you have worked in, maybe you come from, it's a community that had bad transportation routes. So we know that as these storms get more intense, we need to be able to have evacuation plans. We need to have transportation routes that can handle large amounts of people moving quickly. It has, how many folks are from the South? Or how many folks in here from the South? So most of y'all just visiting, right? She raised a good point, because people always say that. I say, how are you from the South? And we're usually thinking Florida or above. And of course, if you're from Puerto Rico or one of the other places, you know, that's the real South. So I asked the question about how many of you are from the South? And there is a dynamic in Puerto Rico, because I have family from there. How many folks know what shotgun housing is? Yes. Look at y'all. I am so proud of y'all. Give yourself a hug. Because I've asked that question some places. One guy was thinking, oh, well, he said he's from West Virginia, so that doesn't mean they walk around with a shotgun all the time. Shotgun cow housing, you open the front door, you can see out the back door. All right? Somebody say amen. There you go. And Haiti also, yes. Or when we talk about energy efficiency, so energy efficiency has been going on in communities of color for a long time. Lots of times people use newspapers around the window sills. Some folks know, put plastic on the windows. Y'all don't know nothing about that, do you? Y'all fancy, right? Okay. So in Spartanburg, we had shotgun housing issues. Why is that important? For those of you who work and talk about energy justice issues, you got folks paying $300 to $400 a month in the summertime for their electricity costs, right? Everybody's talking about healthcare now. We know in our country, I think it's 20 million that's uninsured, and then underinsured, the numbers go up even higher. Their seniors had to travel sometimes about a half an hour to get to healthcare, right? Jobs, a little bit of crime, a whole bunch of other different dynamics that are going on. They got a $20,000 environmental justice small grant and have been able to leverage it into about $270 million in changes. What does that look like? And let me say this, it is a community-led effort. And why that's important is lots of times we want the city or the county to direct what's happening in communities. And sometimes they may not have the best interests of those communities, or they may not already have looked the way that they do. And sometimes maybe they have been a good partner and just the right resources haven't been in place. So now They have new transportation routes. They had brownfields and Superfund sites. Those have been cleaned up. They got 500 new green homes in this community. And they lowered the electricity cost from that $300 to $400 a month down to $67 a month. Now that's important because it puts some disposable income back into people's pockets so that they can use it for other types of things. They got 5 healthcare centers now and a mobile healthcare unit that actually goes out to the schools for folks who don't have transportation. That's power. They had food desert issues. Now they have a supermarket and other businesses have built around that. That's power. It also creates jobs. There are jobs that are now created in the healthcare facilities. There are jobs that are created in those businesses. And the homes that were built, folks went through worker training programs and participated in the redevelopment and redesign of their community. Brownfields and Superfund sites have been cleaned up and they're about to put a 35-acre solar farm in there. Helps to lower the emissions that are going into the atmosphere. Helps to lower people's electricity costs. So now they're going to zero out people's electricity costs and they're creating jobs. And there are a number of other things that are happening in there. That's environmental justice. But lots of times we don't get the opportunity to talk as much about how we are revitalizing and redeveloping our communities because there are so many other issues that are going on that we are trying to deal with. And you can see these examples time and time again that have to be a part of your thinking and the paradigm of where we're trying to get to. So when we talk about a Green New Deal, let's link it to those real world examples that communities have already been doing and build upon that so that we can have real success that's driven by real people that gives real results that people can never take away. Does that make sense to everybody? So I'm not going to talk much longer. Yes, I am. I'm lying. So I want you to think about this. People will tell you time and time again that you don't have power, that you can't make change happen. How many folks in the room, when you were in elementary school, someone taught you about power? You don't have to lie. It's okay. 2 people. How many people taught you in high school about power in a significant way? Of course, Omega did, because Omega was probably teaching the class at that time. So 2 people. 3 people. I'm going to share with you that you actually do have power and can make real change happen. How many folks in the room remember the Women's March, the first one? So a lot of folks do. Sisters. How many of y'all remember men saying that 1 million women would never come together? Yep. And sisters said, oh yeah, I got something for you. 1 million women came together. And not only did people march, because sometimes we pay attention to the march, which is super incredibly important to bring attention to an issue, but it's about what happened afterwards and how women went back home and they said, if I can't find somebody who will run for office, I'll run myself. And now when you look on Capitol Hill and in state houses and in city councils across the country, they are led by powerful, intelligent, focused women who are helping our country to become what it's supposed to be. That's power. How many folks remember the Science March? Hey, go on. A lot of y'all remember the Science March. I was there. And I'll tell you something. It was interesting because a lot of people said scientists would never come out their labs. But they did. Gingerly. They just eased the door open and they were like, is it okay? I said, come on out. And they came to march because we had a government that was not living up to its responsibility around science. You've seen in the news these advisory committees that they continue to strip and place folks who have no science background, making decisions and helping to manipulate policy so that industries that are fading can continue to have a foothold. Does that make sense? So the scientists came out and we were about to march. And can I share something with y'all? They ain't have a whole lot of rhythm. So I said, left, right. Left, right. Don't worry about it, just march. And folks marched. Now, again, it wasn't about the march because organizations like the Union of Concerned Scientists, the Thriving Earth Exchange, all these different organizations Y'all know she's with the Union of Concerned Scientists, right? Let's make her real embarrassed. Give her a round of applause. Just make her real embarrassed. Dr. Adrienne Hollis, not only with a PhD, but also a law degree. Why it's important is because they began to do what many of you will do in the sense of helping to build capacity in an authentic way. I often talk about authentic collaborative partnerships. That means that they're not trying to come into communities and take over and tell people they hopefully are honoring citizen science. And if they're not, we need to continue to work with them. But at least they're there when folks in the government have moved away from some of their responsibility because the current administration doesn't place a value on science. Does that make sense to everyone? We also have had Black Lives Matter, people standing up and saying that the murder, which it is, of black men is no longer acceptable. These unfair enforcement policies and practices no longer have a place. And, of course, we have youth who, of course, been part of those, but now are really moving into an even stronger leadership position. You have This Is 0 Hour. You have the folks with the Sunrise Movement and so many others. And let me give a shout out to the HBCU Climate Change Initiative with Dr. Robert Bullard, Dr. Beverly Wright, who've been doing it for a long, long time and been doing it well, who also have to be a part of the history of incredible work that's happening in the youth space. But that's power, because people are saying that these impacts that are coming from climate change are not a joke, that my life is going to be impacted and maybe eliminated or shortened because of these impacts, and are saying that real change has to happen. You guys saw the slides that talk about all the things that are happening in the renewable energy space, the incredible amount of jobs and possibilities that are out there. Over 5 million new jobs could be created over the next couple of decades. But you also saw that if we don't take advantage of this opportunity, that there are other countries that will, and they are making huge investments in this space. So if we truly want to be a leader, then we should lead. And that means that we have to make the investments that are necessary to make real change happen. The only way that real change will happen starts with each and every one of you. Do me a favor, look to the person to your left. Some of y'all mad? I don't know what happened. Look to the person to your right. Reach your right hand out to the person on your right-hand side. Let's see how, okay. Some people are struggling. Help your neighbor. Help your neighbor. Reach your other hand out. That way you can't mess up to the person who's on your other side. All right. Leslie, like that daggone Mustafa. Everybody do me a favor, stand up. Let's see how talented you truly are. I want y'all to think about something. In all seriousness, you are going to have some incredible presenters who are going to take you deep into the law. They're going to take you into things around zoning. They're going to take you into some of the other types of chemical impacts that are happening, all the things that you need here today. I want you to remember this. Unfortunately, we are now at a time when we have to make some decisions. We are at a time when we have some folks who are trying their best to separate us. And sometimes we buy into that and allow that to happen. I want you to think about something. And let's be honest with each other. Sometimes we will be walking down the road or down the street, depending on where you live, in a rural or urban context, and we'll see somebody coming, and we'll get on our cell phone, even if it ain't charged, just so we don't have to talk to them. Is that real talk? All right, that's real talk. Or we will get on an elevator, and we will look at those numbers and think to ourselves, Lord, please don't let anybody ask me a question. Real talk? We have to change the dynamic of how we dehumanize each other. Because when we dehumanize each other, we allow injustices to happen because it's somebody else's problem. That could never happen to me, right? Dr. King said that we come to these shores in different ships, but we're all in the same boat now. Climate change, many of these impacts that are happening put us all in the same boat, along with a number of other issues. We have to make a decision if we have power and we're going to utilize it. Everybody do me a favor. Everybody say power. Power. That was just pathetic. Y'all didn't believe you have power. Everyone say power. Power. Everybody do me a favor. Drop your hands. Put your right hand in the air like it's 1968 at the Olympics. Let those folks in the state capitol and on 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue actually know that you have power. Everybody say power. Power. I'm Mustafa SantiagoAli. Thank y'all for a couple minutes.
Don't go anywhere. So a miracle has occurred. Mustafa has 19 minutes left. Oh my
shoot.
God.
What?
So we
I'm
have
getting
19
better.
minutes for Q&A. Put your hands up.
Put
if
your
you have
hands
a
up.
question from
Put your
Mustafa.
hands up. Okay. Yeah, let's get into it. I know somebody going to ask me about the hip hop caucus every place I go.
One editorial correction. It was our son, Omari, who talked about the hurricane, not Omega.
It was Omari. Omega has two incredible sons that I know, and one of them participated last night and just broke it down. So we just wanted to make sure you knew he was in the room yesterday. Yes. Other questions? I'm not that good, so I know y'all something. We'll just sit here and hum until somebody asks a question. Question? Yes, ma'am.
Hey, thank
Introduce yourself, please.
Sure. I'm Janelle Wilson. I am studying here at Duke. I'm getting my master's in environmental management. I know you had a really long and successful career at the EPA in the Environmental Justice Center there. And I'm curious when you were talking about successes earlier, what successes do you feel like were the most powerful, most potent in that office and in that capacity that you'd like to share today?
Sure.
Because it's hard to find successes in the environmental justice area, and I'd love to hear some of the things you're most proud of.
Wow.
Great question.
Yeah, so I'm most proud of the fact that I saw evolution in the agency in the time that I was there. Because I remember, I think Vernice probably knows the story. When I first started, so when I started the agency, I probably looked like I was about 12, because I just looked super like a kid all the time. And I remember I was walking down the hall, and there were two gentlemen who were older, who were walking in front of me. It was one of our first meetings that was actually going on there. And I remember hearing them talk, and they were like, this environmental equity thing, because at that time it was called environmental equity. They said, I don't know why we're going to this meeting, because what these folks are sharing can't be real, and they're probably lying. Now, think about this. These are the folks who have the responsibility on a national level for the protection of our country, depending on what particular area they worked in. And for them to have that mentality said something about how so many of these different types of impacts were actually happening. Fast forward to before I left, you know, we had thousands of folks who had been trained on environmental justice in the agency. That doesn't mean that they were all doing anything perfectly, but that was a part of the evolution. We had doors open where communities could engage with folks. Doesn't mean that everything was always resolved, but at least communities had, a way in. We had advisory committees that had, over the years, tackled some very tough issues, brownfields issues. So folks sometimes see the success of the worker training programs that are part of the brownfields. That came out of recommendations from folks who were part of the NEJAC. Most people don't talk about the history of that and how.
And what's the NEJAC?
The National Environmental Justice Advisory Council. Thank you, Professor. Because we use way too many acronyms. The Interagency Working Group. So when we talk about some of the successful projects around the country, many of them came out of demonstration and revitalization projects. And the Interagency Working Group, when done right, has the ability to begin to address the issues that are really happening in communities. Because you have 17 federal agencies and a couple of White House offices. Real talk, White House offices haven't always done as much as they should be doing in that space, but that began to build programs inside of those other agencies, because you can't address environmental justice issues just from the Environmental Protection Agency. That is a paradigm that will not work and should never be followed. You got to get past these silos. So Department of Transportation. So the project I talked about, a part of the work that happened and the change, the Tiger grants out of the Department of Transportation, HUD, CDBG dollars, so forth and so on. So I'm proud of the fact that people began to think more in a holistic fashion. the science needs to catch up in the sense of cumulative impacts and synergistic impacts and multiple impacts that are happening inside of communities. And you've had folks who are in this room and in other rooms that have been pushing the agency. And hopefully the next administration will actually pay attention to that, because it's going to be magnified because some of these additional stressors that are going to come from climate change. I'm proud of the fact that right before I left, we had the first in the entire federal government a national youth work group that was focused on environmental justice and climate change issues. It's ridiculous that that had never happened before, but we got that in place. But there needs to be youth representation on a whole lot of different FACAs, federal advisory committees, and other advisory boards to make sure that, we're being truthful and honest and fully integrative of all the various folks who have expertise in our country. I'm proud of lots of things in the sense that we were able to be the first in many instances. But I'm also sad that we were the first in many instances because other programs should have been moving forward. I'm proud of our grant programs. The Environmental Justice Small Grants Program that I mentioned came out of a set of recommendations. I'm going to give you more than you asked for, but that's just me. $26 million has made it to communities, about 1,600 communities. And many times that small amount of money was able to be leveraged or used to be able to get other dollars from other sources. I'm proud of the Community University Partnerships Grant Program that actually helped to establish on a number of college campuses environmental justice programs. Wouldn't have been done otherwise. And if we're not helping our academic institutions to get going on that, as well as our states. So we had the state and tribal environmental justice grant program. Many of the states that now have environmental justice programs came out of that. So I'm proud of a whole lot. But I'm also sad that many of the successes, much of the progress is now trying to be rolled back. I don't like the fact that the Office of Environmental Justice was moved to underneath of the Office of Policy, because environmental justice is larger than just the policy. It's the enforcement actions. It's all the grant creations. There's the legal aspect to it. There's so many different things. So as happy as I am, I also know there's a lot of work that needs to be done. Yes.
So let me add a couple things.
Please.
Lowering of the actionable level of bloodlet to a much, much, much lower level than it was before the Office of Environmental Justice and the NEJAC got involved in that conversation with EPA. So it's now, I believe it's five decigrams, milliliters per blood. The change in the Uniform Land Relocation Act, so that when a community is being moved out of harm's way because it's exposed to toxic hazards, people who rent their homes can also be moved under the federal government. That's a formidable change. The changing in the National Ambient Air Quality Standards down to a level that begins to speak to the reality that communities of color and poor communities have on the ground. We can go on and on and on about the policy changes, but where Mustafa ended is exactly right. It was very subtle, but over a 25-year march, EPA made extraordinary changes in addressing the issues of disproportionate impact of environmental harms on communities of color, low-income, tribal, and indigenous communities. Right now, the agency is in a fight for its very existence. So we've had policy debates before with different administrations about how to implement environmental policy and what is the role of EPA. We've never had people try to destroy the Environmental Protection Agency and the entire environmental protection framework. This is a markedly different moment in time than any moment that has come before in the life of the Environmental Protection Agency. So if you care about anything relative to environmental protection, watch what is happening to EPA and try not to let it go on. Yeah. Keep rolling, Mustafa.
Yeah, and just two other quick things. Title VI never made as much success in that space, and now it's almost non-existent. And then NEPA, the National Environmental Policy Act, which is so critical when we start talking about infrastructure, as well, has almost disappeared inside of the agency. So I'm sorry, but go ahead.
Look to your right, Mustafa.
To my right. Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Mustafa. Thank you so much for all the work that you do and have done. My question is looking forward, right? We're all finite. And even with the best will in the world, the problems seem overwhelming and all around us. How would you prioritize? What do you see as the biggest priorities moving forward?
To address environmental justice?
To address environmental justice, particularly in an era of climate change?
Infrastructure. Not infrastructure in the way they're talking about roads and bridges. We have to rebuild the infrastructure inside of these agencies on the state and federal level. The capacity to address these issues has diminished significantly. And if we don't build that, then we're going to miss a number of the pieces to address climate change. So for me, we've got to correctly build the structure inside of the 17 agencies who have responsibility in this space. And that we could talk about what that actually looks like, but that's one of those pieces. The second piece is we need to begin to strengthen our laws. So we've got some, decent laws that are on the books, but in my estimation, there are some gaps, especially with some of the newer challenges that we have, and to fully make sure that environmental justice is being honored. So we've got to do that as well. And I think lots of people want to see sweeping bills. I think that we can do it in a different way, in the sense of being very sort of pointed in the places that it needs to go. I think that's another way that we can have more success. And then we have to redirect the resources that are going to be necessary also. And we can talk about what that structure looks like offline. Yep. Yes.
So I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about your work on the Deepwater Horizon spill and the EJ issues that came up around that.
Oh, my goodness. Yes. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because, a big focus here today is going to be on both, natural disasters and man-made disasters. And remember that, especially when we start talking about some of the pipeline stuff, those are going to be man-made disasters. And BP was an example, along with Flint. So when we had the BP oil spill, folks were not prepared for what was about to happen and what did happen. The role that I played, and I was sort of mid-level at that time, I got a phone call from the head of the enforcement program, and they said, we've got this issue that's going on, and you'll probably be needed for about 2 weeks. And I'm thinking, well, I could give up 2 weeks. And we began this journey where it continued to grow and grow and grow in intensity. And environmental justice was not really being thought about in any type of a significant way. So I was given the task of being the lead for environmental justice for the oil spill. Matty Stanislaus was also there. He was the AA at that time.
Assistant Administrator.
Yes, the Assistant Administrator for the Office of Solid Waste and Emergency Response, known as OSWR. I just don't want to get beat. Y'all just don't know. Bernice will get me later. So Maddie was the first one really who was down there. There was another person, because I believe in real talk, her name was Lisa Garcia. Lisa was the senior advisor at that time. And Lisa went down for a quick second. And so I was responsible for kind of helping to get many of the communities, some of the meetings that were going on, to get people plugged in and to help the agency to understand. I also played a role in helping people think about some of the other impacts that were happening. And it wasn't just me. I mean, there was all kinds of community leaders on the ground who were sharing and helping a bit also. So there were a couple of different dynamics. One of them was, where was all this waste going to go? So they weren't thinking critically about that, because when we have these disasters, people just want to get to a cleanup, stop first, whatever the impact is, and then get to the cleanup. So people weren't thinking about that the landfills were in our communities, and a lot of this waste was going to end up getting moved and would end up in our place. People weren't thinking about the workers who were going to be in this process and making sure they were protected, but also making sure that communities of color had an opportunity to participate as contractors and subcontractors in that space. And just an aside, if you look at most of the disasters that have happened, I would probably say all of the disasters that have happened, and I use this term, and don't get as anchored to it as you might want to, the good old boys or good old girls, in many instances, are the ones who get the contracts and the subcontracts and the sub-subcontracts. And then they may bring some folks of color in or lower income folks to participate in part of the cleanup. But the resources that would help to build capacity and help a business to grow so that the next time there's a natural or man-made disaster, that people could fully participate in that, doesn't normally happen. The BP oil spill was another example of how that played out. And we've got to change that dynamic also. I can talk about disaster economies and what we need to do in that space, but that was a part of that as well. So really it was about trying to make sure that one, the information that was getting out to communities was being translated if it was other languages, and making sure that one, people were plugged in and had a better understanding that was going on. The cleanup stuff was a part of it. But the most important part, and people are still dealing with this, is the settlement stuff that still in many instances hasn't made it to those communities that were more impacted than certain other communities. And that's a dynamic that each time we deal with one of these disasters, we need to be better prepared and more strategic in our thinking about what are the long-term impacts that are going on. And then also helping along with some of the health study stuff that was going on and making sure that people had some of that information in real time, although it takes a while sometimes for all that to come together. And the Corexit, which Lisa Jackson still, she had to make the decision of that being used to break up the oil and then those impacts and then all the stuff that went down to the bottom. And, a lot of the seafood, was being impacted by that. And many of the fishermen and crabbers and all these other folks who make a living and their culture is tied to this, all of that is something from an environmental justice context you would think about, where others would just be thinking about what is it their specific job and not how all these things come together that can help folks to move more quickly to a better space.
One last question.
Yep.
Hi, Makati. I'm a law student. A couple weeks ago, another law student asked me a question that I didn't have a great answer for, so hoping you can give me a better one.
Yep.
He was asking about, a lot of times when a hazard is moved out of community or decides not to go in a particular community, we want to make sure that we don't just kick the can down further to an even more disenfranchised community, right? And so, in particular, he was asking about the incarcerated population and, how many hazardous sites are near prisons where, these people aren't voting, they don't have representation. We talk about pesticides and agriculture. Increasingly, our agricultural labor force is the incarcerated population working for, pennies a day. Foodborne illness, I think, is like 5 to 6 times higher in prisons. In New York, where I'm living right now, we had, things like the heat going out in the winter. And so when it comes to environmental justice, first of all, are there movements that, include the incarcerated population? If not, how can we make sure that we're not, as I said, kind of kicking these problems down to the most disenfranchised groups we have?
Yeah, so first we need to stop with this high rate of incarceration that happens in our country. So that's the first place. We just need to talk about, the realness. There is a component of the environmental justice movement and a couple of the other movements that are focused, of course, on the prison population. So let me just give you this also. So we talk about our most vulnerable communities. You hear people talk about that language. And lots of times we're talking about communities of color, low-income communities, and indigenous populations. I began to have a better understanding that there's a whole nother level below that, if we can frame it that way. And there are 2 groups that I've been focusing on doing a tiny bit of writing about. One is the homeless population, and the other one is the prison population. And the reason that I say that is because they are literally trapped, whether there are bars there that are holding them in place, or there are other types of structural things that are in place that are holding and anchoring people in the impacts that are happening. You raised about the prison population. So some folks don't know that in many instances they build prisons on the cheapest land, just like they do with some of the other facility stuff that we usually talk about.
Public housing.
Yeah, and public housing. And in many instances, they're building on former brownfields and Superfund site land. So depending on the level of the cleanup, you've got all these impacts that are going on. You've got ventilation issues that are going on depending on how old and the design. And lots of times there'll be emissions that I've worked with a couple of people where they were talking about the emissions that came in. If it's an old prison or an old jail, you also have asbestos issues, you have lead issues. You have all these sanitation issues with backing up and all the issues that are going on there. So how do we begin to change this dynamic? One, we have to make sure that prisoners have more rights in their families and being able to work through some of these processes. 2, we need to stop citing the prisons in these locations. And then of course, ultimately is we stop incarcerating people who in many instances haven't done things that they have to be locked up for. There are other ways of us going through enforcement related actions in that space. Let me just talk a little bit also, because you didn't ask the question, but I'm gonna give you more than you asked for, around the homeless population. I want y'all to really pay attention to this, because when we talk about many of the exposure pathways that many of the communities that we've worked on deal with, folks who are living next to roadways and who are breathing these emissions from diesel trucks and cars and all these other types of things, it's just mind-blowing when you look at what the homeless population is dealing with in that situation. I work with a lady whose name is Kelly Miller, and she talked to me about being homeless on the street and the lack of access to clean water, not just for drinking, but also, for bathing and for all kinds of other things that folks have to deal with, and that people in many instances sometimes will go and drink from, all kinds of things just to be able to survive. Because now there are so many rules in so many places that won't allow homeless people to come in, and they bar them, so folks are dealing with. So what I want you to just think about is when you think about some of the impacts that you're looking for, overlay that with if a person was in prison, or overlay it if someone was homeless, and how much more would they be impacted in this, in this space. And it begins to just get your mind moving to a much more expanded way of looking at some of these issues. And that's where we have to get to, because if we're not thinking in a more expanded way, we're going to leave folks out. When we talk about, and I'll close with this, when we talk about the impacts of climate change, right? We talk about these severe heat events. We talk about these flooding events, these hurricanes. Think about, as this brother back here raised, if you are a prisoner and they don't allow you to get out of the cells, and we've seen that sometimes, and the dynamics that go on in that space. Think about when people are beginning to put their emergency plans together, and if you are homeless and you're not in the loop of where you need to go, if there's a bus that's going to help people to get out, or a van, or whatever the situation might be, how much more dangerous is that situation that you are locked into because of your lack of access? Our communities of color, have always had a lack of access to information, and that's why environmental justice and other movements have been so important in helping to make that bridge and that connection to information. But if you don't have access to a computer, and everybody now puts everything, the announcements and all these types of things, then you're even in a much more tougher situation. So that's why I say we have to expand our area of study. We have to expand how protective our various laws and statutes and regulations are. And we also have to expand whom we're reaching out to and inviting into a situation. Imagine how difficult it is to come to a conference just based upon where you are financially. Now imagine if you're homeless, how would you ever get to an event where you get to talk and sit down and strategize and plan about impacts from man-made or natural disasters, or just the everyday impacts that's happening in the air and water and land context? So that's where we have to be, is that we have to make sure that when we say we're inclusive, that we are fully inclusive, and we're making sure that everybody can be a part of that process. I'll stop.